Space was quiet. Too quiet. Commander Sarah Blake stood alone at the forward observation deck of the USS Vigilant, hands clasped behind her back, watching the endless sea of stars. Beyond the ship's armored glass canopy stretched the silent black expanse of the void, dotted with points of cold light. Out here, above Earth's blue marble, there was no sound, no wind, no life, only the hum of the ship's reactors and the faint vibration of the deck beneath her boots. She tried to imagine what the Arendari fleet looked like right now, beyond Neptune's orbit, aligning for their burn inward, moving with the perfect mechanical precision of an empire that had conquered 100 worlds before humanity even discovered the steam engine. They believed this would be their 101st conquest. A soft hiss of the deck doors broke her thoughts. Commander. Captain James Rourke stepped in, tall and broad-shouldered, his duty uniform crisp but his face drawn tight with fatigue. Even the lines around his eyes seemed heavier these days. "They've transmitted again," he said quietly, as if speaking any louder would disturb the fragile calm. "Same message. Third time in 2 days." Sarah didn't turn around immediately. She took one last look at Earth, its vast oceans glowing beneath the sun, storms swirling across its surface, and finally faced him. "Put it through," she said. A moment later, the alien voice filled the observation deck. It was transmitted on all frequencies, a smooth, resonant baritone that seemed engineered to sound both calm and commanding. "Humans of Sol 3, it began, you stand before the will of the Arendari Empire. Your species has been observed. Your capabilities assessed. Lay down your weapons, deactivate all planetary defenses, and submit to Imperial governance. Failure to comply will result in your extermination. This is your final warning." The message ended, leaving a silence so deep it seemed to press against the walls. Rourke exhaled through his nose. Polite as ever. Sarah's lips pressed into a thin line. "They think this is mercy. This is just procedure for them, an efficient way to add another star to their banner." He stepped closer. "And us refusing? You know what that means. We can't fight a war like this, Sarah. Not with what we have." She let the words hang between them, then moved past him toward the comm station. "Patch me through to the bridge," she said. The hollow projector in the center of the deck flickered to life, painting the air with a translucent 3D display of the Vigilant's command crew, navigation, tactical, engineering, comms, all waiting silently for her word. "This is Commander Blake," she said, her voice steady. "Transmit our reply." The comms officer hesitated. "What should I say, ma'am?" Sarah didn't look away from the projection. "One word." She spoke it clearly, with a cold finality that left no room for misunderstanding. "Try." The word went out in a tight beam burst, crossing millions of kilometers in less than a heartbeat, and in that single syllable, the shape of the coming days was set in stone. No one on the deck cheered. There were no clenched fists, no war cries. Only the quiet acceptance of men and women who understood that the next time those stars outside the viewport flared bright, it would be from weapons fire. Rourke broke the silence first. "They'll be here within 72 hours. "Then we have 72 hours to prepare," Sarah replied. The bridge hollow dissolved, leaving them in dim light again. "You ever wonder why they waited this long?" Rourke asked, almost absently. "They've been watching us for decades. Why now?" Sarah turned back to the stars. "Because they think we're ready to kneel." He frowned. "Are we ready to fight?" The question lingered like smoke. Humanity had one Titan-class warship, the Vigilant. It had been designed as a deterrent, a last resort, a weapon that was never meant to actually fire in anger. Now it was the only thing standing between Earth and extinction. Sarah's jaw tightened. "We don't fight wars, James," she said at last. "We survive them." Her words were not bravado, they were a vow. The next day passed in a blur of preparation. On the bridge, the crew moved like parts of a living machine, running diagnostics, arming weapons, loading magnetic slugs into the Vigilant's massive railgun batteries. The ship's hangars buzzed with activity as fighter crews prepped their squadrons for launch. Everywhere Sarah walked, she felt the tension thrumming in the air. These weren't soldiers who'd grown up expecting this day, these were pioneers, explorers, engineers, scientists who had volunteered to serve because they believed in something bigger than themselves. And now they were about to become warriors. She passed through the mess hall, where conversations were quiet, almost reverent. Someone had pinned a photograph of Earth on the wall, a silent reminder of what they were protecting. That night, Sarah didn't sleep. She stood alone again at the observation deck, staring at the endless dark where the enemy fleet would soon appear. When Rourke found her, hours later, he brought 2 mugs of coffee and offered her one. She accepted it without a word. "Can't sleep either?" he asked. She shook her head. He leaned against the railing beside her, sipping his drink. "You ever think we might actually win?" Sarah didn't answer immediately. Her eyes were fixed on the stars, but her mind was far away back on Earth, imagining children playing in a park, families eating dinner together, lovers arguing about something trivial. All the small, ordinary moments that would be erased if they failed. "Yes," she said finally. "But not the way they think." He glanced at her. "Meaning?" "They think this is a war. Battles, campaigns, treaties." She turned toward him, and there was steel in her voice now. "But this isn't a war, James. This is survival. Wars can drag on for years. Survival ends quickly. One side stops breathing." Rourke nodded slowly. "And we make sure it's not us." "Exactly." She turned back toward the viewport. Somewhere out there, beyond the edge of sight, alien warships were burning toward them at relativistic speed. The thought should have filled her with dread, but instead, she felt something cold and steady settle over her. When the Arendari came, she would be ready. 3 days later, at 0214 hours, the first sensor blip appeared on the Vigilance long-range radar. Sarah was already on the bridge when the alert came. "Contact," the sensor officer called out. "Multiple signatures, bearing 015, Mark 20. They're here." The holographic display bloomed with crimson icons as the enemy fleet dropped out of faster-than-light space. Rourke's hands tightened on the railing. "God, there are so many of them." Sarah's voice cut through the rising tension like a blade. "All stations, battle alert. Launch all squadrons. Prepare to engage." The klaxons began to wail, a deep, resonant sound that echoed through every deck of the ship. The bridge crew snapped into motion, voices crisp, focused. Sarah stood at the center of it all, calm and immovable, a solitary figure in the storm about to break. Outside the viewport, the stars seemed to hold their breath. The silence before the storm had ended. The first shot came from them. A lance of plasma seared across the void, glowing white-hot as it tore toward the Vigilant. The bridge lights dimmed automatically, filters cutting out the glare. "Brace," someone shouted. The impact flared against the Vigilant's shields, making the whole ship shudder as though a giant hand had struck it. Warning lights blinked red across the tactical displays. "Shields holding," the officer reported, though sweat had formed on his brow. Sarah Blake stood in the center of the bridge, feet planted wide, unshaken by the tremor beneath her boots. "They fired first," Rourke said grimly. Her jaw tightened. "Then we finish it." She turned toward the gunnery stations. "All batteries, return fire. Target their lead cruiser. Full power." The ship's massive railguns spoke as one. There was no sound in space, but the Vigilance deck thrummed with the recoil of mass drivers hurling tungsten slugs at a fraction of light speed. The first round struck the enemy ship dead center, slamming through its shield and hull with unstoppable momentum. The alien cruiser's icon on the holographic display blinked once, then went dark. "Target neutralized," the tactical officer called. A beat of silence passed, then a murmur rippled across the bridge. Not a cheer, just a grim acknowledgement. "One kill down. Dozens more to go. Rotate firing solutions," Sarah ordered. "Keep them off balance." Outside, the void erupted into a deadly ballet. Human and alien ships began to dance across the battlespace, weaving in and out of firing range, launching flares, countermeasures, and fighters that streaked like fireflies. The enemy formation shifted, sleek spearhead cruisers pulling ahead while heavy carriers hung back, disgorging clouds of attack craft. "Enemy fighters inbound," Rourke warned. "Launch squadrons," Sarah replied. The Vigilant's hangar bays opened like the jaws of some great beast, hurling human strike craft into the void. The fighters fanned out in perfect formation, their engines leaving faint blue trails as they cut through the darkness. The first dogfights began. From the bridge, Sarah watched through the external feeds as human pilots engaged the enemy. The displays showed flashes of light, quick bursts of weapons fire as fighters darted and rolled, twisting through a field of death. "Bravo 3 is hit," someone shouted from the comm station. A blip on the display winked out. Sarah forced herself not to react. Every loss felt like a punch to the chest, but she couldn't flinch. "Not here. Not now. Keep the squadrons in tight formation," she said. "Break their flanking maneuvers." The Vigilant herself continued to trade fire with the alien fleet, its railguns pounding relentlessly, its point defense turrets spitting bursts of light to swat down incoming torpedoes. The ship shook again as another plasma lance struck, this one hard enough to rattle teeth. "Forward shields at 72%, the tactical officer reported. "Divert auxiliary power to shields," Sarah ordered. "Hold the line." Rourke moved closer to her station, his expression grim. "They're concentrating fire on us. They've figured out we're the command ship." "Good," Sarah said without hesitation. "Let them waste their shots. The longer they focus on us, the more time our squadrons have to dismantle their escorts." The battle dragged on for hours. Time lost all meaning, measured only in weapons cycles and casualty reports. The void filled with wreckage, human and alien alike, drifting, burning, colliding silently in the dark. Then came the turning point. "Commander," the tactical officer said suddenly, his voice sharp. "They're regrouping. Looks like they're pulling back to long range." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "Why?" "They have numbers." Rourke studied the display, then his expression shifted. "They're learning. They don't want to throw ships at us piecemeal anymore. They're going to reform and hit us with a coordinated strike." Sarah considered this in silence. The Arendari weren't fools. This wasn't arrogance anymore, this was adaptation. "They think they can break us with one big push," she said at last. "Let's prove them wrong." She turned toward the helm. "Bring us about. Plot micro-jump coordinates for point-blank range." The helm officer's eyes widened. "Ma'am, that'll put us right in the middle of their formation." "That's the idea," Sarah said coldly. Rourke didn't argue. He only nodded once. "Helm, execute," he said. The stars outside twisted and blurred as the Vigilant jumped. The inertial compensators whined, and then the ship slammed back into normal space right in the middle of the Arendari fleet. "Fire everything!" Sarah shouted. The Vigilant unleashed hell. Railguns tore through enemy ships at knife fight range. Plasma batteries spat gouts of blue-white fire. Missile pods roared, saturating the battlespace with guided death. The enemy's formation collapsed in seconds, their perfect geometry thrown into chaos. "Multiple kills confirmed," the tactical officer reported, voice hoarse. Outside the viewport, alien hulls bloomed like dying suns, one after another, their death throes lighting the void in bursts of orange and white. But the counterfire came just as quickly. Another plasma lance struck home, throwing Sarah against the console. The bridge shook violently, alarms blaring. "Port shields down," someone shouted. "We've got hull breaches on decks 9 through 11. Seal them off and reroute power." Rourke barked. Sarah pulled herself upright, gripping the console until her knuckles turned white. The air smelled of ozone and scorched metal. "We hold here," she said, her voice low but steady. "We hold or we die." And they did. For 30 more minutes, the Vigilant fought in the heart of the enemy fleet, tearing ships apart with every broadside, refusing to give ground. Human strike craft darted like wolves, ripping at the stragglers until the Arendari lines broke completely. Then, just like that, it was over. The last enemy cruiser exploded in a silent blossom of fire, scattering debris into the void. For a long moment, no one spoke. The bridge was filled only with the hiss of vents, the faint crackle of damaged circuitry, and the sound of exhausted breathing. Finally, Rourke broke the silence. "Enemy fleet destroyed," he said quietly. There were no cheers. Just a heavy, shared exhale. Sarah sank into her command chair, her muscles trembling with fatigue. Around her, the crew sat slumped at their stations, sweat and soot streaking their faces. "How many did we lose?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The comm officer hesitated before answering. 34 strike craft. 2 escort frigates. Hundreds of lives, ma'am." Sarah closed her eyes. This wasn't victory. Not really. This was survival. And survival always came with a price. When she opened her eyes again, there was no triumph in them, only resolve. "This was just their first fleet," she said. "They'll be back. And next time, they'll bring more." Rourke nodded grimly. "Then next time, we'll be ready." Sarah stared at the wreckage on the display, dozens of alien icons blinking out one by one, replaced by the cold emptiness of space. "No," she said softly. "Next time, we end it before they get the chance." The galaxy didn't sleep after the first Battle of Sol. News traveled faster than light, carried by terrified merchants, deserters, and scattered survivors of the Arendari fleet. They spoke of a single human warship, one ship, that had stood against an imperial armada and left nothing behind but burning wreckage. The Arendari Empire's response was swift and merciless. Within weeks, the second fleet was assembled. Twice the size of the first, armed with upgraded weapons, escorted by dreadnoughts that hadn't been seen outside of border wars in centuries. To the Empire, this was no longer a policing action. It was an extermination campaign. But humanity didn't wait for them to come. Commander Sarah Blake stood on the Vigilance Bridge as the stars twisted and blurred beyond the viewport. The ship was in FTL transit, carrying humanity's first-ever offensive strike force into enemy territory. Her crew was silent, grim-faced, running on exhaustion and iron will. They had seen the cost of war up close. They understood what Sarah meant when she said they wouldn't fight battles, they would end them. "Drop in 60 seconds, the helm officer reported. Sarah's hands tightened around the railing. "Weapons hot. Target data ready." Rourke stepped closer to her side. "You really think hitting their supply chain will break them?" "It won't break them," Sarah said. "It'll scare them. The Empire thinks we're defending our home. Today we show them we can reach theirs." The stars snapped back into focus as the Vigilant dropped out of FTL. Before them hung an Arendari shipyard, massive, skeletal structures orbiting a red dwarf star, studded with half-finished warships and swarming with construction drones. "Targets locked," the tactical officer said. Sarah didn't hesitate. "Fire." Railgun slugs and plasma bolts tore into the shipyard. Explosions rippled across its length, scattering debris into orbit. Half-built dreadnoughts shattered apart before they ever had a chance to launch. Secondary targets engaged, someone shouted. The strike force fanned out, systematically dismantling the Arendari supply lines. Fuel depots became suns, factories vented atmosphere into space, communications arrays went dark. Within hours, the entire system was nothing but twisted wreckage. Rourke exhaled slowly, watching the destruction on the display. "That'll slow their advance." Sarah's eyes were cold. Not enough. The campaign continued for weeks. Human ships struck deep into Arendari territory, hitting places the Empire considered untouchable. Every raid was surgical, precise, leaving no time for counterattack. The Arendari retaliated with fury, but every time they struck back, they found the humans waiting, ambushing their fleets, shredding their reinforcements. For every human ship lost, 10 of theirs vanished. And then came the mission that would change everything. The Vigilant emerged from FTL into the skies above Arendar Prime itself, the beating heart of the Empire. The planet was a glittering jewel, its surface glowing with city lights that stretched across entire continents. Orbiting stations hung in high orbit like watchful sentinels. The bridge of the Vigilant was silent. Rourke's voice was low. "We actually made it. Broadcast to the entire planet," Sarah said. The comm officer blinked. "Ma'am, you mean? To everyone. Every channel. Every frequency. Civilian, military, I want every living being on this planet to hear me." The officer hesitated only a moment before nodding. "You're live." Sarah stepped forward, her face illuminated by the faint blue glow of the holo. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. "This is Commander Sarah Blake of the USS Vigilant," she said, her tone calm, almost gentle. "For months, your empire has sent fleet after fleet into our space. You came to conquer. You came to subjugate. You came to erase us." She paused, letting the silence stretch, letting the weight of her words settle over the entire planet. "And we warned you," she continued. "We told you to try. You did. And now you know what that means." Behind her, the Vigilant's main cannons swiveled and locked onto the nearest orbital station. Sarah didn't order them to fire. She didn't need to. The message was clear. "We don't want your worlds. We don't want your empire. We want peace. But if you force us to choose between peace and survival," her voice hardened, cutting like a blade, "we will choose survival. Every single time." The words were broadcast to billions. The entire planet seemed to hold its breath. Then, at last, the reply came, not from an admiral, not from a general, but from the Emperor himself. His holographic image flickered into life on the bridge, tall, regal, his crest feathers lowered in submission. "We surrender," he said simply. The words hit the crew like a physical force. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Rourke turned to Sarah, his expression unreadable. "Just like that?" "Just like that," she said quietly. Outside, the orbital stations powered down. The planet's defense grid went dark. The Arendari fleet stood down without firing a shot. The war was over. Hours later, Sarah stood once more at the forward observation deck, staring at the world below. "You think they'll ever try again?" Rourke asked, coming to stand beside her. She didn't answer right away. Her reflection in the glass looked older than it had just months ago. "Harder." "No," she said finally. "Not after this." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "You sound sure." Sarah turned to face him, her expression unflinching. "Because now they understand. We don't fight wars, James. We end them." Her words carried no triumph, no glory, only the quiet finality of someone who had looked into the abyss and refused to fall. And across the galaxy, the message spread like wildfire, whispered from planet to planet, system to system, until even the smallest fringe colonies knew the truth. Humans didn't fight for territory. They fought for survival. And survival meant making sure the war could never happen again.